It was, it wasn't common. It was relatively rare. And in my book, I compare it with the rape statistics from other wars, like the Revolutionary War, the European wars. Some European observers said the American soldier is amazingly well behaved. The number of rape cases were very small compared with any other war in history. Roughly half of the people convicted of rape were executed. The other half were given long prison sentences.
What about Sherman's March to the Sea? A lawless time, pretty good order, a myth out of control? What did you find in your research?
Well, I'm no expert on Sherman's March. What I can tell you is that there's no court-martial related to rape related to Sherman's March. Other people have done complete books on Sherman's March to the Sea, and they found that many of the people who reported that their family home was burned and so forth were 50 or 100 miles away from Sherman's troops. The Southerners tended to attribute every damage done in Georgia to Sherman.
Even if it was a hailstorm.
Yes.
Interesting. So the most common problem was desertion on both sides.
Yes.
Interestingly. What about foreign troops? Do we have any statistics on foreign troops and the relative court-martial versus American troops who had been here at the outbreak of the war?
Well, a historian up in Minnesota and I are working on an article related to the Irish troops. And the first question is, were the Irish troops drunker than the other troops? The tradition is yes. Irish troops are always drunk and out of control. The actual statistics based on the court-martials is their record of drinking and disorder was no worse than the others. We're working on a second thing comparing the German troops and the Irish troops, because the German troops were drinking beer and the Irish troops were drinking whiskey, and we're not quite done with that. But we did run across one great court-martial. The witness testified he couldn't have been drunk, he was only drinking beer.
Great. So what are you working on now?
Over the years, I've accumulated a box full of original letters written by people home, mostly soldiers writing home to their male buddies at home. And these are wild. They describe carrying on with the prostitutes in New Orleans. They describe encounters with girlfriends. They write back and they say, who's sleeping with Susie now, in very graphic terms. And it's just an aspect of the war, which has really never been written up before.
Wow.
And these guys are just into all kinds of things.
Well, this is fascinating stuff, because this is the view of the Civil War you never get, and
Yeah.
it's really the human side. It seems like human nature doesn't seem to change much,
Not much.
you know, over the centuries. Which brings us to, you know, your prolific writings. You've not only written on the Civil War, you've written on World War II as well. And which period do you have a special affinity for, or is it all of history that you're fascinated by?
Oh, just about everything. I'm fascinated with 1500 BC. Well, that's where everything changed. You know, the whole Mediterranean business changed, and you know, one group of Greeks disappeared and were gone for 500 years, and there was a huge turnover in Egypt and so forth. But that's a long ways from our Civil War.
Right.
The World War II book, I read a thing by somebody that said, why does America still have battleships? The Battle of Taranto showed the battleship was obsolete. Well, I'd never heard of this battle, so I looked it up. Fascinating. This is, the British sent over some old biplanes and sank half of the Italian battleships in one night. So I wrote a sort of a draft on this, and it got turned down by a bunch of people, so you don't know anything about aviation, which is true. I managed to find a British bomber pilot who had flown in that raid. John Wellham, he was still alive. We corresponded, and he and I collaborated on the book. So I got, you know, the real view of a guy who was actually there, flying one of these big biplanes in the middle of the night, dropping a torpedo.
And from what I understand, the Japanese actually got the idea to attack Pearl Harbor from the British raid on Toronto.
Yes, and not just attacking a harbor, but attacking in a shallow harbor. Because usually when you drop a torpedo from a plane, it goes deep. And if you drop it in Pearl Harbor, it gets stuck in the mud. And the Japanese adopted the idea of a special way of launching a torpedo so it wouldn't go deep.
So, with your vast knowledge and interest in history, why do you think it's important for people to study history? Americans are often accused of not knowing their own or anybody else's history.
Well, we have all these hotshots that work for the financial services part of AIG. They're so young they don't remember a recession. They were sure with their quantification and their complex formulas and their computers, they had a system in which the market and the value of things would go up and up and up because they never looked back even within my lifetime at the recessions and the economic crashes and the Great Depression. They were all focused on the last 10 minutes ago.
Well, as the saying goes, the past is prologue, and we want to thank Tom Lowry for joining us today. He's certainly a man who loves history. To learn more about his books and the Civil War, World War II, please visit our website at www.timetravel21.com, and be sure to click on our blog, the Great American History blog, where you can read and respond to a lot of historical thinking. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.